Hi, welcome to this series. This is the fourth video of a series of 5 called Denigration to Devotion, and it's a Mary Magdalene series or circle. And this is a time of reflection, a time of sacred gathering. So I'm intending that this session in itself is a container for any of the feelings or issues that come up in you as we're talking. And also there's this bigger container of these 5 circles that is meant to hold you in reflecting on yourself, your situation, your calling, and what you want to be devoted to. And then we're just letting Mary Magdalene guide us on that journey. My name is Elisa Carr. My website is i4heart.com. That's EYE, the number 4, heart.com. I am an interspiritual spiritual director and a psychotherapist, and have what I feel quite devoted to is this journey of healing and consciousness that I get to practice in my own life and lead people on a daily basis. And so I welcome you into this way of doing that whenever you find yourself coming to this video. So let me review a little bit about where we've been so far. As I said, this is the 4th session. So the first one, we listened to this message that came through for me very strongly, a transmission it was from Mary Magdalene in an unlikely place. And that was this message of I have not been treated as sacred. And we explored that related to Mary Magdalene, related to the feminine, related to the earth, and also related to ourselves. And then in the second video, I invited you into some healing energy. The teaching might have wandered a little bit, but the outside, the sunlight, the trees, the birds, the chanting, the anointing were all inviting us to begin healing those places in us that have been rejected and denigrated. And then in the last video, the third one, it's called A High Calling, and we looked at what our calling is now at this time. This is the Monday after Easter in 2020, April 13th in 2020. That video was on Friday, I believe, which was the 10th, Good Friday. And we're just looking at this archetype of the story of the crucifixion, the death of Jesus, the resurrection, and Mary Magdalene there by his side. And what that means for us today, regardless of your religious beliefs or affiliation, the story invites us into an exploration of ourselves. And so go back and view those if you haven't already. I think that will prepare you even more for what we share today together. And so I will start us off with a chant that I had shared a couple of times before, and as a way to get us centered and just bring our attention within. And so this is a chant that comes from St. Hildegard's, which is the group I worship with in Austin, Texas. And I'll share it with you. So just breathe and become comfortable and relaxed. This is going to go on for probably 30 minutes or so. And so whenever you have the time, and take a deep breath. Slowly blooms the rose within. 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 And release the air out completely. And this is what this journey really is all about, is opening our being up just like a flower unfolds. And as I said before, Mary Magdalene, I see her as a guidess and a teacher and someone, a model for us for healing and for devotion especially, and for being the priestess that she was, and being the partner and beloved that she was and is. And so part of my message that I shared that really strong one that came through. And at the end of that meditation that when I received I have not been treated as sacred, I also was feeling this desire for undivided attention. And I was playing with that desire that I had, meditating on it, and just seeing as these threads were coming together, all these threads that I've been sharing with you in these videos, it came to me, this phrase, undivided attention, and that Mary Magdalene was calling for me to give her my undivided attention. And so I played with that, sat with that, and yes, feeling the call to be with her in a more intentional way, to be in my meditation and my prayer and in my silence in a more intentional way, to be connecting with the divine creative spirit of the universe in a more intentional way. And so out of that comes this series. So in my giving Mary Magdalene her undivided attention, my undivided attention, I feel led to share all of this with y'all. And that's what has been born here in this series. And so the next step along the journey, that after we listen to the high calling, the Mary Magdalene anointing the head of Jesus prior to him being arrested and killed, now we come to the other end of that story, and that is where Mary Magdalene is the first one to be a witness to the resurrection of Jesus. And in all four of the Gospels that we have in what is known as the Bible, Mary Magdalene is named in all four of those, which makes it even more curious why for so many centuries she has not been brought into the story that often, except for to read the gospel. And that is part of this calling, is to bring her back into the story with great intention. And I've heard some other videos of people doing that. She is back in her, as she said, I've been waiting to come to you. And so in the Gospel of John, the chapter 20, I believe it is, the story is that she goes to the tomb, of course, with her anointing oils and spices to anoint the body after the Passover, after the Sabbath had been completed. And I'm sorry, the Passover was just the time of year, but the tradition was to wait until after the Sabbath to anoint the body. And she sees that the stone has been rolled away. Mary is just racked with her grief. She's devastated. She is crying. And most of us have had some type of experience of losing someone, or maybe a pet, or some other kind of loss, maybe the loss of a relationship where we just feel devastated, racked with grief. I wrote about this earlier, or at the end of last year. I have had that experience. And so we can sort of put ourselves in her shoes in this feeling of deep, deep sadness and a sense of being lost. The only thing that she knew to do was to carry on the tradition to go anoint the body, and the body's not even there for her to do that. And so now she's really beside herself with what to do. And Jesus appears to her. She doesn't even recognize him until he calls her name. And this is another element of the video on the healing and anointing. We talked about being recognized and known. And so in this story, we see how known that Mary Magdalene felt by Jesus when, in the calling of her name, she knew who he was, no matter if she could see him clearly or not. And so there is this reuniting of them. And so what I want to call out about that right now is this devotion. So that we talked about this last time, the devotion that she had to kind of seal, to send him off on his journey towards his true authentic calling, and that being part of her true authentic calling also. And now she comes on the other side to be with him in his death, is what her intention is. And in that, she is with him in his rebirth. The Gospel of Mary, which is considered one of the Gnostic Gospels, is not in our, quote, Bible. In that Gospel, the story and the teaching of Cynthia Bourgeault poses the probability that Mary Magdalene had also held the space for Jesus during these 3 days following his death, and in what we call Holy Saturday. The tradition is that the harrowing of hell in the Gospel of Mary, it looks like Jesus going to confront the demons. And there is a sense that Mary traveled with him in the imaginal space, in the fourth dimension. She also stood by and participated and supported and held space for Jesus answering or meeting up with these so-called demons. What I invite us to, in the thinking of this as an archetypal story, as well as, a lot of us believe this actually took place, but it's this archetypal story, and it shows us the critical nature of meeting our own, quote, demons. Now, this takes us back to the very first video where I invited us to see that each of us in our own hearts, in our own psyches, maybe even in our bodies, have parts of us that we have rejected, that we have denigrated, is the word I'm using. And this story of Jesus and Mary going to confront the demons of the underworld, I feel is representative of our own call to do that for ourselves. And I mentioned also in the last video that this business about a high calling, that one of the highest callings, especially at this time, is to do our healing work, to do our grieving, to be like Mary and pour out our feelings, to cry the rivers of tears. to authentically express ourselves without regard for outside judgment or other messages that might tell you otherwise. So that's this one part that I wanted to offer, this idea of the devotion that she showed and this work, this inner work. The other piece of the story at the end, so Mary goes to just grab a hold of Jesus and hug him, just like we might do if someone returned that we had great love for and had not, and believed to be gone. And his response to her is somewhat curious. It is, "Don't cling to me." And then he tells her to go and tell the other disciples that he's had this rebirth. He has come back from the dead, and that he will be meeting them in Galilee. And so, that's a hard lesson. That's a hard message for us to receive. At least it is for me. To not cling to something that we feel so much love for, so much devotion to, that there could be parts of us that want to hold on tightly to a person, a way of life, a situation, a relationship, a part of ourselves that we have just learned to rely on. And the message is, don't cling to me. Go and tell. So it puts us in this place of, how do we navigate the kind of devotion that Mary Magdalene shows us, models for us, is the guide us for, as well as not being attached. Oh my, I really believe this is the crux of the human journey, at least so far that I know. Maybe during this time we're going to get to flip some switches and get some new codes in. That's what I'm going to be talking about in the fifth and final video, new codes. But right now, at this point in the story, this is the challenge that we face. Let me just sit with that for a minute. Let me sit with it, and you sit with it also. And let me bring in this extreme, unprecedented experience that we are going through in the spring of 2020, known as coronavirus and COVID-19, where we are all in our homes. Well, not all of us are in our homes. There are many quite oppressed groups that can't be in their homes. There are the elderly that are in nursing homes. There are prisoners that are in prison. There are immigrants in detention centers. There are homeless people. There are a lot of marginalized groups that aren't at home. And there are many of us who are usually out and about and running around, busy, using up resources all the time, and we're all at home. And the many of us are wondering what to do. What do we do? And so I have been teaching all along and inviting people into the idea that what we are to do, well, many of us are just needing to work and maybe are busier than we've ever been, or confronting problems that we have never confronted before. But as much as we can, to take this as a time out and a time to learn and listen for, well, what are we devoted to? What is important to us? What do we want to give our undivided attention to? And are you living your life in that way? Is that the way? Are those the things you want to give your undivided attention? Is undivided attention even a possibility for you? Sometimes we have so many things going on that we're scattered everywhere, and maybe something is calling for your undivided attention, whether that is a child that you're caring for, or a spouse, a significant other, your own being. So just listen for what that is at this time. And gosh, aren't we also being asked to let go of so much that we've become attached to? In the first video, I talked about the stripping that is happening and shared a song that reflects that energy. Take from me everything that takes me from you. And that's the whole practice. This is a practice of Buddhism, of letting go of attachments. It's a practice of centering prayer, letting go of thoughts. Let go, let go, let go. Return to center, return to center. Mary Magdalene just shows us over and over how to do that. Jesus shows us how to do that, how to walk our authentic path. Our authentic path is going to come out of our own inner wisdom. We're going to be asked to walk the path that Elisa needs to walk, that you need to walk. They just show us how to walk it. Each of our paths is different. Many of us find similar, and we support each other in that. But we are a community and all have very different gifts to offer. We, however, are being asked, I think, to just clear ourselves out and to heal ourselves as much as is possible. And so this space that we're in, Richard Rohr talks about liminal space, the time in between when the past is going away, but the future is not yet. We don't know what to expect. It's uncertain. And so this is where we find ourselves, even in our, those of us that celebrate Easter. We all, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're in spring. These are about new life, rebirth, and yet we're inside. And so we're still sort of in our winter time. I've heard the phrase coronavirus cocoon. I think that's lovely. Like, we're still in the cocoon. It's not time for us to sprout our wings and fly yet. And so this series is to help support you in that, and listen to what needs, the demons that need to be made peace with inside of yourself. So I have this song that I'm going to share. Hopefully we get to share it in a meditation. The last time my video cut off right in the middle of the song, so I'm going to tell you what that is. The song is from Elephant Revival, and it's called Home in Your Heart. So if you want to tune that up on your iTunes or Spotify, have it ready to go in case we lose connection here. Even if we do lose connection, at the end of that song, which is about 4 minutes long, I'm going to close us in a reflection prayer for everyone's intentions. And so I hope you can stay with me for that. But even if the video cuts off, I'll be doing that for us. And so I do, as you're listening to the song, the invitation is to be devoted. And I didn't say this earlier, but I've been loving the idea of devotion versus the idea of commitment, or being devoted versus being committed. not that there's anything wrong with commitment or committed, but it does have a little bit of a feel of obligation, or I think some people can feel like trapped by that, like a rule, whereas this devotedness or devotion comes from the heart, and it comes from our desire. And so the invitation is for you to be devoted, and you to find what that is that calls you to be devoted to. And the other invitation that the energy comes through in the song is to really get to float, to get in the flow of things. My friend Cindy Butler loves to say a lesson she learned, which is get in the boat and float, and to not fight the current. And so what does that look like in your life during coronavirus? How do we get in the boat and float? How do we flow with the river and not fight? So I'm going to take a breath, and you take a breath. I guess I'll also bring in this. This is a card I was working with last week. It's from the Goddess Power deck of Colette Baron Reed. And this is Parvati, and the word is devotion. So she is part of my messaging that came through that made me want to share this with you. All right, so again, be sure you're comfortable and take some deep breaths and just listen to the words and the feeling of this piece of music.
Falling down, spin me round. No one said this would be easy now, but you gotta keep moving somehow. Drifting round, cold river bound. Someone said to me one day, head on down to the waters and stay a while. Go down to the soul of the river, go where love found you there. Feel deep down goosebumps and shiver. Go where the mouth of the river runs wide. And don't push that river, let the river move you along. Home in your heart, and there's heart in your home. Don't force nothing, and something will come around. Light as a feather when you're homeward bound. City soul from the smoke alley road. You dance along, all your words turn to prose, but you're not bound, no shameful regret. You set your sails and move full speed ahead. Yeah, don't push that river, let the river move you along. Hold in your heart, and there's heart in your home. Don't force nothing, then something will come around. Light as a feather when you're homeward bound. Light as a feather when you're home. always said this would be easy now, but you gotta keep moving somehow. Hey, don't push that river, let the river move you along. There's a hole in your heart, and there's heart in your home. Don't force nothing, there's something more right. Light as a feather when you're homeward bound. 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 Light as a feather when you're home.
Okay, so return with your breath. Connect with your body. That was Booker following my directions. Bring your awareness back into your room and back into this time with me. This is again Elisa Carr. And I will close us with this kind of blessing or intention that each person that connects with this teaching, this circle, can open up to what calls you to be devoted to. And to know that this struggle with non-attachment, that you are not alone in that struggle. And that as human beings, we are always moving between attachment and unattachment. But following our hearts and listening to what is authentically ours to be devoted to is what Mary Magdalene calls us to, and what Jesus calls us to, and what the Buddha calls us to, what Parvati calls us to. And that is my prayer and blessing for everyone who watches. Peace be with you, and there will be one more video in this series. I hope you'll join me for that one as well.